Everything.
They're coming up. And you'll be able to get a question
How did they say to submit questions?
on Facebook.
Yeah, we can get questions.
Is that on now? Not yet?
زيارتك حبيبي
لأنه
الشرف لي ابونا
أشكرك إذا كمان هاي. Okay, that's good. Okay, good. Oh, but that's okay, all right. No, it's okay. I hope it shows. Okay, all right. I don't know if we are actually can hear us on the live stream or not. Can somebody check the live stream? Okay.
Just give 5 minutes and introduce him. Is Neil gonna or is going to do all that?
You just text him. He's asking me if he agrees to once the question, whether should we finish the servants edition or the question and answer sessions are enough.
So he has, does he have time to do the prayer? I think this is enough to give them the chance to ask.
Okay.
And that's why he said we're going to give, did they mail them the servants? Because I asked them to send the PDF
Which PDF?
for the servants, whatever we had. We had a working
Oh,
plan.
I don't know about that. But you definitely announced about the
Okay,
stream. So.
okay. Because they were telling me they didn't get any announcement.
No, well, I think the announcement went on the WhatsApp group that Abuna Michael has for the contact
Contact
individual
person, okay.
for the competition.
So we have to speak here.
From anywhere. Say that one more time. We are on. We should be on now. Can they hear me? Can they hear us? Okay, can they hear us?
The answer here, where does the answer?
I think they will text Jackie. Okay, they hear us? Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. We ask you, O Lord, for your blessing. Guide us into your kingdom and bless this evening so that we be fruitful and according to your holy and blessed will. Through the prayers and supplications, Holy Virgin Mary, Archangel Michael, St. Mark, St. Athanasius, the saints of this day, the blessing of the fast of the apostles, make us worthy to pray thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Okay. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. May the Lord bestow upon us his grace and his blessing, now and ever into the ages of all ages, amen. For those who are attending virtually and those who are attending present, I hope that everyone did get the information. I was talking to some of the servants that maybe there's, I don't know if all of the WhatsApp was communicated to all the servants, but at least this should be recorded for the servants to be able to access later. However, for the question and answers, that will not be available later, at least with us, but perhaps through the committee. I wanted to briefly explain why we are having this session, because there are some people we're assuming that this will be new material that will be testable, but it isn't. This is just a session to explain what is in that material and to give an opportunity for servants to ask questions about that material or about the testing. We had a session for the high school and college last Friday, and Abuna Michael was with us for the committee and to specifically answer those questions related to the testing. Because usually those who are preparing the material are different from those who are testing the material. So if there are questions today regarding to how it's going to be tested, unfortunately Abuna is not with us, but that can be communicated through the WhatsApp group, or I guess through the website for the committee. I also wanted to apologize for the confusion related to the junior high material because there was, as you noticed, some change that was done. The first round of material was more at the high school and college level, and so when we realized that, we had quickly summarized and simplified. So if your material seems a little bit complicated, you think that it's high school, you might want to double check to verify that so that you are not studying something more advanced. If it's okay for you, then it's okay for us. But hopefully you will learn more than expected. We also are working right now on the material for next year. We won't say what that is, but if there are some concerns or feedback, I know from some of the servants regarding the material, let us know, or requests for something, because we're trying to put more than 1 year at a time so that we won't run into this problem that we had this year for the material to be a little bit late. Our objectives for today are not to go through all the material in 2 hours. It was basically to go through an overview and to clarify the important points, to give guidance in the material, and also to give an opportunity for people to ask questions of clarification on certain points. We had one question at the end, can you tell us what's important in all of the material? This was the point of the whole talk, to give you those guidelines for the material, and it's a supplement, like I said, not new material, but to explain the existing material. In the last session, I gave many questions or sample questions. There is a servant packet that also was supposed to be released, and I believe it is up there. It has in the margin just some sample questions or guidelines. So I hope that everyone has it. Those questions are mainly, it was not questions that will be asked, but they're questions that would clarify the material or to help hone in on how the material, you deal with the material. And usually what I was speaking with the committee, usually when we give questions, we try to have a certain percentage, like about 20% or so of that material that could be asked from. But again, our goal is to provide just assistance support for the existing servants, not to replace what's going on in the individual churches. In terms of the material, why did we choose this material? And I think it's very important for us even to explain that to the servants, like why you'll notice this year there isn't an overlap, and that's intentional, between the Psalms, which is the Bible portion, and then the spiritual canon or rule and discipline, which is focusing on the Igbeya. And what we were trying to do is how to relate the two subjects this year to one another and also to our spiritual life on a daily basis. So that's why we were hoping it to be more simple and more applicable. And our hope or desire is that after this year, that we have a deeper understanding of the Psalms and a daily practice of the Psalms, so that it impacts our life, that we understand, if possible, to memorize the Psalms, to understand the Psalms, and to apply them to our life. And that's why the section on how to pray the Igbeya and how to sit with your Father in compassion, like this is the journey where we want this goal to happen, not just to memorize and to regurgitate what we learn, but actually to apply this. And it is easier and difficult for that reason. It's easier because I think, especially when you look at the material, it's very straightforward. And so straightforward that everyone's asking, how much do I have to memorize from this? But it's difficult in the sense that there's so many ways to approach the Psalms and to understand even the Igbeya. So it's, in terms of if someone's just approaching it and how to be, it's very difficult to know how to test this, especially because like one of the ideas for the creative portion is to compose your own song, or how to analyze a song. Like we will give samples of different songs, but ideally what we were expecting is that I can give you any song and you'll be able to understand it. Because if you know the tools, like if you know how to use a hammer and nails and a screwdriver, so then I can give you something that's broken and you should be able to use the tools to fix this. It's different than I ask you, okay, what is a hammer? You say, yeah, this is a hammer, and describe it. So how to use that, it's going to be a little bit more challenging, but the reason we are doing this because we want to really test or to really help in learning, not just testing you for material. And next year will be much more focused and geared towards that. So some of the questions, it's why we're going to use this year to prepare for that, how to be able to understand and to apply that knowledge in a deeper level. So, and this, I hope we will achieve it. We make some people very happy. There are certain type of learners that's how they learn material, is how to apply it. They call it kinesthetic learning, how they live the material. But there's other people, like if you're just memorizing, it's going to be, I think, maybe when you get to the exam this year, it will be a little bit more challenging. Because that is not our goal, for you to memorize everything. Yes, there's some things that do need memorizing, but hopefully we'll be able to address those things and to help you and to assist in this. Okay. I'll turn it over to Guna David, who will go through the main points and to help us to guide through the material. I have to thank his reference for not just this year, but every year in the material, and as well as providing the best servants to make the material what it is. And anytime we need adjustment, they're very quick and, with the grace of God, effective.
Thank you, Sayyidina, very much, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve in this capacity, and thank you for giving us the blessing of being with us. I will pick up from where Sayyidina left off. I truly wish, since I started to be part of, the committee, I guess, or writing, or every time I'm thinking, I wish that the material that we offer is not just a material to be tested, but it's a material, like what Sayyidina says, that actually changes our hearts and changes our lives. Of course, and nothing more important in this than the life of prayers, which is for the junior high. It is the focus of, and the Agbeya, of course, it's the focus of the second half of the material, which I think it's very important. The first half, as you all know, speaks about the book of Psalms, which is the tool, like what Sayyidina was saying now, which is a tool that helps us to pray. And so I wish that as we teach, I'm definitely speaking to servants, I wish as we teach, we're not only teaching for testing, but we're also, in a sense and in a way, teaching our youth, starting with junior high, even to start using the Agbeya properly, and even teaching them how to pray with the Psalms and how to use the Psalms in their lives. I think this is a very important part that I wish we can accomplish in this year. So, of course, I will talk quickly about the Book of Psalms, and then I will come to a couple of points, a couple of areas in the document regarding the Book of Psalms, and especially in the biblical component, which is the first part. And then we'll move on to the spiritual part afterwards. So if you have your document, it starts with the uniqueness of the Book of Psalms, which talks in the introduction about how unique the Book of Psalms is. There is a component here in the first introductory paragraph, which is showing, you probably see it right now, it's highlighted. It says, it is as if the words written there are our own. This thought is very beautiful, to think that the Psalms, and I think that's important to teach the youth, that the Psalms are our own. We don't leave them distant from us as if, they're written, they are definitely written thousands of years, but we want to bring them to our lives and bring them to the lives of the youth. So I think this is something important that we need to teach the youth. If we look into the competition as something that the youth would live by. I will not talk about every point. Before we get into this, I will make a comment, and I hope this comment you take it cautiously. The material is written college, high school, and then junior high. And the material is reduced from the college to the high school to the junior high. Yes, the junior high has its own unique parts that are not covered in the college. However, if a servant feels challenged by some of the material in the junior high, he or she is more than welcome to refer to the college material. There could be a more elaborated section about it that they could actually look into it, just as a guidance. I don't want you to consider that to be part of the material, and that's why I said just use it cautiously. So when we look into the material, when we come to the name and the structure of the book, you come to the first challenging part. I think really comes in the numbering of the Psalms, which is point number C. You find that on page 2. It's on the screen right now. I don't know how clear you can see it on the screen, but if you don't, then you probably open your PDF file, and it's on page number 2. So let me elaborate a little bit on this, or actually just go over this section. So early on, the book of Psalms was written in Hebrew, and that script, I guess, or manuscripts, or these writings, the Psalms, were later on translated to the Jews who left, Israel and Palestine and lived abroad, where the Greek language became almost the dominant language of the time. And so there was the need of translating the Hebrew to Greek. And so, of course, there are, and this is an important part, I think, if we're able to start putting this in the minds of our junior high youth, the concept of manuscripts, at least not in a difficult approach, but in a very simple approach. The idea of that our Bible is translated from different languages, and so we can see different translations, and so we come to see in the book of Psalms this very unique feature, and very unique, I guess, characteristic of the Book of Psalms. We find the numbering between the numbers that we have in our own Bibles, the common Bibles that we use in our homes, which is usually if we use the New King James. You find these numbers are different than the Orthodox Study Bible, for example, or the numbering of the Psalms in the Agbeya, or the numbering of the Psalms in Coptic Reader, or in the Katamaris book. You find them off by one, and you wonder sometimes why. This concept is what's talked about in the numbering of the Psalms. It starts when Psalm 9 is divided into two Psalms, and I think after that, so Psalm 9 and 10 are combined. So Psalms 9 and 10 from the Hebrew text are combined into Psalm 9. From the Hebrew text, which is, again, the common Bibles that we use at home, unless you're using an Orthodox Study Bible, you find Psalm 147. Again, that comes in the Greek to be two Psalms, 146 and 147. And you find this explained in the document. I think this is probably one of the areas that you will be challenged to maybe explain. And I think it's important that if you can introduce this concept of different manuscripts or the concept of translation from a Hebrew to Greek, and we'll find different numbering. And you will also find the extra psalm which is talked about, which is Psalm 151. Again, those of the servants who have Orthodox Study Bible, they find it in there, and they pray it in Bright Saturday when we come to church. And so we need to start introducing this to the youth early on, because I think that is important for us as Orthodox to feel comfortable with these concepts. And that, to make it easy on the youth, you can probably simply just tell them that the Hebrew numbering is one ahead of the Greek. So you will find the Hebrew numbering is always one ahead of the Greek numbering. Another area that you might find the challenge with it. So comes the concept of, you find this in page 4 in your document, how the usage of the Psalms in the Jewish worship, how it was used in an antiphonal practice. And it talks about the instruments that were used in the temple, the string instruments and the cymbals and all this. And honestly, as I was reading the material, I myself thought, it would be nice if I have some kind of visual to help me to just envision, how the temple would look like, what these instruments would look like, because definitely not many of these instruments we're familiar with. Very easily you can probably search, ancient worship Jewish temple chorus kind of thing or something like that, and you find some pictures. Of course, be careful with what you use from material online, but again, you can probably find some of the images you can probably use. It will probably help you to get the students, get the youth, to get their mind around the temple worship and how it looked, how did the instruments look. And I think that would help them just to be a little bit more engaged and a little bit more comfortable with this. I think as you study with them the book of Psalms, you find in the material very involved our liturgical life, and I think it's important to integrate that too as you explain the materials. For example, it talks about Atai Parthenos, this version, the hymn that speaks about the Holy Virgin Mary, talks about the Bright Saturday, how Psalm 151 is. I think it's important for us, and I know this might not be exactly testable material, but it is testable material because it's in the document. It's important that we engage the youth in the life of the church. This is very, very essential. From the temple to the church is really a section that talks about how the apostles mainly and the church now uses the book of Psalms. This section is easy, is not hard. Okay, so we come into St. Athanasius' letter that comes, the letter to Marcelino, which comes in page 8. So as you read, you will find let me start by saying, if you are a servant teaching the junior high competition material, I think I highly, highly recommend that I know I'm stepping out of the material now, but I highly, highly recommend that you read the letter to Marcelino by St. Athanasius. I think it will give you such a great background and foundation on the book of Psalms and how to use it and how it could be used in every occasion. I think this is very important. So you find this section is a little bit different than the college and the high school material. So this section introduces you to that letter to Marcellinus, which he sent to ask St. Athanasius how to understand the book of Psalms and how to use it. And so St. Athanasius writes him this letter. The letter is not long. If you get to read it, that will be great. And I think it's a very useful. If you can do that, you will do yourself a great service as you teach this. Comes a section in this about praying the Psalms. And you find that in page 9. And in a way, I am not, in a sense, summarizing this section for you, but you can look into this page, which is page 10. It's about praying the Psalms. You can actually put it in bullets. These short paragraphs, you can actually put it in bullets, and I'm going to go over these bullets a little bit with you now, and you find this on page 9 and 10. So, starting the section that says, we cannot continue to live in sin. So, in praying the Psalms, one, we cannot continue to live in sin while using the book of Psalms and expecting that it will have an impact on our lives. 2, when we truly pray the book of Psalms, the Holy Spirit will unite our body, soul, and mind. Point number 3, the Psalms is a prayer to every human feeling and emotion. Number 4, the Psalms were the prayers of men whom the Holy Spirit transformed their lives. And if we truly pray these Psalms with the same heart, the transformation will come into our lives as well. Point number 5 is that St. Athanasius tells us that we need to pray the Psalms with confidence, knowing that God hears. I want to pause for a moment here because I think this section is important. I don't know if you're serving junior high, you probably hear many of our junior high youth as early as 6th grade, and hearing them, you probably hear them saying, I'm stressed, I feel down, I'm depressed. We hear very big words from our very young youth, and I think if we teach them to use the book of Psalms as a form of prayers, in the time where they need, in the time where they feel like now I'm joyful, I should express my joy to God and praising using the book of Psalms. I feel a little bit down, I run to a psalm where I can pray to God to give me comfort and peace. You find this whole work is done in St. Athanasius' letter to Marcellinus. Again, it's a thought. I think it's done in one of the appendices. But you probably can make just again, I go back to how to use this material to be for the lives of the youth. If we can create some kind of card or something or some kind of a way for them to connect now that I feel joyful, I can pray this. I know this is not competition material, but again, if we want to take this to the next step, I feel down, I can use the psalm. I feel challenged, I can use the psalm. I think this is important. The psalms are just, they run deep down in our Orthodox lives, and I think if we start early on teaching our youth to use the psalms properly, this will become part of their lives. Okay, so now, as you know, as we talked about St. Athanasius' letter to Marcelino and his overall look on the book of Psalms, there's also St. Basil has homilies on the book of Psalms. It's a 150-page book, but I'm not going to ask the servants to read, but later on, if you want to read this, it will be good for your edification. So we have the same, almost St. Athanasius and St. Basil start speaking about the book of Psalms as it's the garden that has so many fruit, but it has its own fruit itself. A very similar introduction that St. Athanasius and St. Basil have in common. In the midst of this document, on page 11, there is this comment that says Psalms for the melody, but their sole benefit from the words. This reminds me, again, the practical use of the Psalms among our congregation. You find our elders, grandparents, and the tetas and the geddos, they tell you, "Oh, Abuna, I was very troubled, but once I prayed Psalms, I felt very different." And I think this is important again to teach our youth and to take the material to life. I think if we would do this, we're able to make this material very practical for their daily lives. St. Basil, again on page 12, he gave us something very good. He says, on the blessing of praying the Psalms, he says it does two things. It does unite people together because we all pray the same Psalms, and it protects us from the demons. So these are 2 points. You can probably have them almost as a summary for that section that speaks about the spiritual blessing of praying and singing the Psalms. All right, so analyzing the Psalms is a section that probably we need to look into a little bit closer. So, how to analyze Psalms? In different words, how do you study Psalms? How do you group the Psalms? Of course, it talks a little bit, the material talks a little bit in the beginning about how the Psalms are divided into 5 books. But this is a different way to look into the book of Psalms. How can you organize them in almost a vertical way, or a subject in a sense? So analyzing the Psalms, this section, really what it talks about, it gives you criteria, that you use these criteria to measure if a Psalm falls into a certain category or not. Okay? So this section is much more elaborated in the college material. So if you are a servant and the material in the junior high, you feel it's not comprehensive to you and you want to have a better understanding before taking this material and giving it to your junior high youth, again, I advise you to look into the college material, again, cautiously, because not everything in the college is in the junior high, and not everything in the junior high is in the college. But that concept of putting the Psalms in different categories based on different factors or different criteria is what this analyzing the Psalms. And it talks about applying the categories into the Psalms. So it gives you the categories in every, it gives you the criteria in every category, and you have the different categories starting with hymns, thanksgiving, petition, individual petition, and wisdom psalms. This is important to teach the youth that when they pray the psalms, maybe sometimes when you teach them to pray the Agbeya, the words and the subject of the psalm itself, maybe they're unable because they're still young, and even when they get older, we're still challenged by how do you wrap your mind around a certain psalm, and so having these categories are beautiful to help you to understand what that specific psalm is about. Learning Christ from the Psalms. So we always want to teach all our youth to find Christ in the Old Testament. Christ is always the center of the Old Testament and the New Testament as well. And this section speaks about learning Christ, who Christ is in the book of Psalms. He is the blessed man in Psalm 1. He is the shepherd in Psalm 22. Again, this is a perfect example of the numbering that we're referring to. Everyone remembers, the Lord is my shepherd to be Psalm 23, right? Because we're just so much used to the Hebrew numbering. While when you look into the Orthodox Study Bible, and when you look into the Septuagint, you find that Psalm is actually Psalm 22. This is maybe something small, but it keeps, it probably sticks into our minds how to make that connection, which one is numbering is less, which one is more, and how there is this difference. So Christ comes to be, he is the good shepherd in Psalm 22. And so this section talks about how and what we see Christ to be in the book of Psalms. Christ the King in Psalm 44. Christ the High Priest in 109. All right, so that brings us to the conclusion for the first part. I don't know if this was enough to go over, but again, we're not going over every single page, but just an overall idea about this section. Sayyidina, any thoughts or comments on? Okay, all right. Just a thought. I think I came across. One of the appendices are missing, I think, in the section of the book of Psalms. And if you read the document and you come to the notes, to the citation at the bottom of the page, some of these citations refers to Appendix 3, which you might not find in the section in junior high, if I remember that correctly. Yeah, so if you want that appendix, then you can probably get it from the college material and see how it fits again carefully with that. All right, so now let's go to the second section, which is the spiritual discipline and the Agbeya. As His Grace explained, the attempt that we've been trying to do is to put together a material that's comprehensive, so you get the Bible and the church study, or the Bible and the church history together to complete one another. So if you go into the spiritual discipline and the Agbeya, now this section is a little harder to test, which will probably requires you to do more work with the youth that you're teaching, and again, we would do, Sayyidina, absolve me in what I'm saying, we would do the greatest disservice for our youth if we turn this material only to be just about the test, just about the competition. We took something very beautiful, which is the agbaya that we use in our lives, and make it just a material to study without giving them the opportunity or without speaking about this agbaya from a spiritual perspective. I think we would do our youth, absolve me Sayyidina in saying this, but I think we would do our youth a disservice doing this. So please, as you speak about spiritual discipline and the use of the agbaya, please make sure that it's not we're not just delivering information, but rather teaching them how.
And it could even, like in the terms or the times that when they are gathering into the church to prepare the material, they make sure that the agbaya is part of every gathering. Even sometimes, like in the evening or at the end, they can go through different practices. Like, say, we'll open the 11th hour, everyone reads a different psalm to themselves, and they have questions, they have meditation, they have application of the theme. Like, there's many exercises we can do that's not in, but just as a servant saying, I want this to be alive. So our goal by the end of the summer is for them to love and use the agbaya in this second part. Like the first part, they know the Psalms in the Bible, they have a background, but how to get that love of the not other emotions for the spiritual competition, but really that's our purpose. That's why it's here. And I want to mention the letter to Marcellinus. I was telling them Friday that if there was one thing they have to I would ask to memorize, which I know is not very reasonable, but if they had memorized St. Athanasius' letter to Marcellinus, and it's in their mind, they would have benefited so much, and they really, you'd be living the Psalms. So we would, whatever the competition is going to be gone, in August, but the rest, what we can deliver as servants, will last their whole life. So that's our goal.
Absolutely. I think another, to go along with what Sayyidina just said, another, I think, practical thing they can do is if servants would give them specific psalms during the competition time and tell them, try to analyze which category this psalm falls under. I think this makes it a little bit more practical for them to get their hands a little bit, involved with the psalms and comfortable in understanding the book. So we go to the introduction again of the spiritual discipline. How do we enter into this covenant? The introduction speaks about the covenant between God and us. A covenant that's based on knowledge, and a covenant based on love. Three things in this section that it talks about, and how do we enter into this covenant? Persistence. How do we build this relationship with the Creator? How do we build this relationship with God? Persistence, prayers, and time. This section speaks about these three elements and point. You also find in the spiritual discipline, which comes on page 30, the document says that the spiritual discipline has these cornerstones: prayers, reading the Word, repentance, and communion. These are the four cornerstones of spiritual discipline. But not the four are not covered in the material. The one item that's covered in the material is the prayer for junior high. But it's important for us and also to teach the youth that these are the four corners of the spiritual discipline. Of course, in the life of sacraments. I'll not talk much about There is an important concept on page 31. It talks about that when we stand before God, it's a moment of judgment and it's a moment of fear. This concept might be a little bit hard for the junior high, but I think it's important to attempt to deliver it in a gentle way. That as we stand before God, yes, we stand before our loving Father, but we also are standing before God, and so we stand in reverence. And we always want Him to grow in this balance between loving God and the fear of God. And I think this concept might be a little bit not easy to explain, but it's actually elaborated on a little bit later on in the document. Again, I'm speaking to servants. Those of you who read Beginning to Pray by Archbishop Anthony Bloom, you find this concept in there. And if you've read the book, go back in the book, you'll find this concept put clear. Okay, so we come to importance of the Agbeya in our spiritual discipline. So the Agbeya is our tutor to this discipline, to this spiritual discipline. The Agbeya is what takes our hands and walk us into the path of spiritual discipline as we grow into our relationship with God. One of the points is what I referred to a little bit ago, control of the passion and emotions. It takes me back to the point that I made a little bit ago. I hope I'm not preaching now. I'm not sounding to preach. But I remember one time I had a night of taking confession from junior high youth, and I maybe had 12 in a row. And probably 8 out of those 12 complained about being stressed. And as very early on they're stressed, I think it's very important that we want them to learn to find comfort in God as they pray the Agbeya and as they pray the book of Psalms. The Agbeya teaches us the life of Christ as we go through the hours, 1st, 3rd, 6th, 9th, 11th, and 12th. I'm sure you all know what do these hours mean and what does they represent in the life of the Lord. And I think and I hope that we're able to teach them to be mindful always of the Lord and His life, and that is taught through the prayers of the Agbeya. The etymology and the structure of the Agbeya, I'm sure all of you are very comfortable with that. Again, it talks about, when we come to page 35, how do we use the Agbeya? And I'm sure, again, you're very comfortable with that. It comes to point D, talks about bringing our spirit, body, and mind together. This is where we come to find, peace, when the whole being is completely put together. All right, so standing, the position, the posture of prayers comes as one of the points. It talks about bowing your head. That's the head inclined, which is this position, not a bowing. It's not a matanya. It's a head inclined, and you find that probably it's referenced actually later on in the document, but you also find it in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 18 with the tax collector and the Pharisee. When it says the tax collector could not lift up his eyes to heaven, he could not look up, probably looking down and saying, have mercy on me. So directives in the spiritual life, we come to a section where we talk about the hindrances One of the hindrances is apathy or lukewarmness. Boredom, lack of enthusiasm, lack of desire to pray. And please, let's try to establish this concept of discipline. Even when we are, with the junior high youth, even when we are tired, we still bring our bodies to prayers. And when we do this, this is when we find comfort. This is when apathy would leave us. And this is where we come to meet God and to see and find our comfort. Of course, busyness comes the number B as a hindrance. And I think there are two types of busyness. That is in page 40. We teach our youth to stay busy. But sometimes they get too busy with too many things that are maybe not so important, to come to a point where they become overwhelmingly busy. And we want to teach them to keep their lives busy but not overwhelmingly busy. But that sometimes that busyness is actually just an excuse of not praying. And I hope as servants, when we come to deliver this, is that we help them to see that in themselves and to confront this thought and see what they can do about it. I mean, remember, you have 6th grade, you have 8th grade. Those 8th graders are turning next year to high school. They're not very young. They should be able to look inside them and should be able to see where are my faults, I guess, where is my laziness and where's my pretended busyness. In conclusion, this is with the spiritual discipline. Definitely, there comes a section that speaks about the spiritual guide, the importance of a spiritual guide to guide them to help them guide their lives in sticking and staying the course of the spiritual discipline. And I think this is an opportunity for us as servants, is to bring the youth to come to see the importance of the spiritual guide and the spiritual father, not just as for confession, but also for spiritual guidance in having and developing this spiritual discipline.
So we have a few questions. There's someone who commented that they wish they had more time to prepare, and I agree. And we wish the same. That's why we're starting this year early for the next 2 years. At least for the younger ages, we will work for the next 5 years. And if anyone would like to assist, please let us know, especially if there are, educators, teachers, servants, please. Because it's only a few people doing a lot of the work, so it's a big burden and responsibility, but we're trying. Other question, in the material, page 1, it says the book of Psalms is referenced by its full title twice. However, later in the material, it shows many more references. I don't have the G.
I have the microphone saying. I don't know if I can help with this. If you can tell me. I know in page 1 it says it is referenced twice in the with its full name. I don't know, where do you see being referenced many times after that? I'm thinking those 2 references are in the New Testament. Where the New Testament says in the book of Psalms those exact words, and I think this is what this is referencing. Okay. Yes. Are you saying the difference between using the title of the book as in the Book of Psalms? Yes. This is what's referred to. This is what it's referred to as the two incidents where the title of the book is used. There's another one. You said in Luke 24. Okay. The use of the short name and the use of the full complete name. Yes, sure. No, and I think when it says the full title, it did not mean that there are different references and usage of the Book of Psalms, but the title is not. So the quote is not introduced by the words "the Book of Psalms says this." Definitely, yes, we know it's in 1 Corinthians, it's in Hebrews, and it's in other references, but the Psalms are used without the introduction of the book or the complete reference. But I can look into MOS. Yes, sure. Will the youth have to recite any reference or appendices? So that's not a question for me. I think that's a question for Sayyidina and Abuna Michael. I think.
So we left it for the committee to answer the questions regarding the test. I wish someone was here last time Abuna Michael came, but there's no one from the committee here to answer that. So we'll have to refer it to them, I guess. We'll forward these, but also I'm sure there's a section on the website for you or in the group to do that as well. Abuna Michael, he probably sees me now, but his answer always said, "Now, if it's in the PDF, it's testable." but again, I don't want to speak on behalf of take this comment out. It's again refer these questions to the committee. Again, the following question has to do with this: how will Appendix 1, Psalm chart on page 24, and the comparison chart on page 25 be tested? That's again. How will the analysis of the Psalm section be tested? May I answer that, Sayyidina? I think this part is very testable. I mean, what are the characteristics or what are the categories for a wisdom psalm? Or what are the categories? What would you look for? Or how do you, if you find these attributes in a psalm, then which category you put it in? So these are definitely very testable material. This is very possible to test. Christ in the Psalms, and also Christ in the Psalm, which is a different section than the analysis. I think it's also very testable material. Who Christ is in Psalm 44, who Christ is in Psalm 22, who Christ is in Psalm 1. Who is referenced in Psalm 1 and why, for example. I also gave them last time too, there are some psalms that are repeated in many different sections several times as an example, and I think that's indicative of how important that psalm would be. Also, like in Appendix 4, I don't know if it's in junior high, the Messianic Psalms. So we gave them a list, and there are some psalms that have several verses that have its own reference, like say Psalm 21, for example. So we said there are very important psalms that I think every youth have to know, and we want to help to identify those together. And you'll find them, for example, mentioned in the liturgical section. They're mentioned in the biblical section. They're mentioned in the Christ in the Psalms, the Messianic in the appendix. So we need to deliver those. The whole point is for them to identify that. There's also some key phrases that we can teach them. They're here, but like when we talk about mountain of God, when we talk about the blessed man, like we said, we talk about the anointed one. Like they should know these phrases because they're repeated, or the little ones against the rock, like we had for the like they should know those things to be able to comprehend not just this, but 3, 4, 5, 10 psalms. And those are the tools we want to give them.
And I think also going back to the appendices, I think Appendix 2 is very practical, very important. Which psalms you pray going to church? What would you say when you're entering into the church? What would you say when you bow down? I think these are very practical. I remember saying a few years ago, Neela and myself, we did deacons class, like just deaconship, no hymns, and we taught the kids what to say to walk when they walk in, what to, and it was very good. And you see those same youth until now, they follow these same. Some.
Yeah, for me, it's one of the most important pages. Like, I don't know how to test it. I know that there's usually a section reciting. But even as servants, we should say the same thing. We want them to know what psalms they're saying coming in, what psalms they're saying if they're chanters, that they're dressing. This is very important. But again, how we're going to test it, I have no idea how they're going to test it. But I wish we as servants say, yeah, we take this opportunity. I know they can't memorize everything. But when they start, we had I remember when we were young, we had a convention, and Abba Musa was giving an award to one of the girls who memorized 150, or 151, during the summer. She memorized until August, between June and August, and then I said, we didn't have our kids memorize 10, but she was able to. So at least as servants, you say, if our goal is really higher than, this is just a help to say, let's do the minimum. But we want to challenge them without the stress, but to see the beauty of it. Like, they will be encouraged, and some of them, not all of them, will be able to accomplish that, and we see what we can do. Someone asking the servant copy of the curriculum, I was discussing with Abuna on Friday, and because we wanted to put more and more questions. And then there was a discussion, see whether or not those questions would go on the exams. So that's where we came out with the compromise. So they told me that it will be up, and I'll double check with them how come it's not on the website or distributed. Because it has a lot of good, even study questions, just how to help to study. So and also, like I said, I'm trying to push the committee to be very creative in testing the material, not to make it difficult, but creative in the sense to test deeper knowledge. So this is harder. So if it's difficult, like if you have a big problem with it at the end, just let us know, because next year maybe it will be very creative. So that's why we hope you also, when you're teaching the material, to be also creative in teaching. It will give a different flavor
for the competition experience.
It's not. So I talked to Buna Friday, so I'll ask him again to see why that's not there.
Yeah, again, question number 8 is, how are we going to be tested on the Appendix 1 and 2 on pages 43 and 45? These pages, again, testing, I don't know. Sorry.
Which one is it? The same as here?
So the one that has which psalm is in each hour?
Okay. So I mean, I don't know what. Yes, I think it's different. I'll tell you what I think, but it's not what the committee. I would say if I were the committee, and they're probably not going to do this with this. But the idea for putting this, and that's why I want to know, why is this there? Number one, I would go through them to see that there's a pattern. So ask them, why is the pattern? What do you notice in the Psalms? They will not get it the first time around because they're confused from the first hour. So say, okay, ignore the first hour. What do you notice? You say that it's going from 1 to 150. 148 to 150 was for the liturgy. It's in the last thing in the fourth host that they would do and start the liturgy. But the idea is that they're going through all the 150 Psalms, but they're selecting them based on the theme. You say, okay, then why does the first hour have more than the rest? I want them to see from this, the first hour has 7 extra Psalms. Why? Because those were the morning Psalms that inherited, some from the Old Testament, but also in the early church tradition. So they know this has a special theme, they were added. The other thing I want them to know is that there's 12 Psalms basically for each hour. There's a structure. That's why we give them the story before of the rule of the angel. So they want them to know that this book is not random, but there's a lot of organization, and there's a lot of thought that went into this. And when they discover that, they will appreciate it more, and they're not just a book with random things. So that's the idea behind this, so they would know also. The other thing is, which I know we're not going to ask them to memorize the order, but as a servant too, they used to memorize the titles, right? Like in Arabic when they distribute in any monastery, and in the churches they used to do it. They distribute based on the title of the Psalms. Now we have the tradition in English because it's easier. We give them the numbers, right? But it should be. That had they known which, so when I tell them, okay, Psalm 22, so they know that they're going to find it in which hour, like roughly. They know it's not going to be in the 11th hour. Why? Because if you're going in order, they know Psalm 22 roughly is going to be, it's going to be in the second. So they have this awareness of the Igbiyat, not just, like, I don't want them to know, okay, Psalm 97, 98, 99, 100. It's easy. It's not that hard to memorize, but that's not the goal of it. The goal is really to understand the structure by looking at it this way.
I don't know. Oh, that's.
For the 5 books of the Psalms, the same thing actually when we were going through it with the college, is to explain that why there's 5, just like the 5 which is in the Old Testament, it's a symbolic number, for the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and you have the 5 books of the Psalms, and you have the Gospel of Matthew divided into 5 sections, because it represent the 5 sacrifices, represent the 5 spoons of incense that we do. Like, this is a big theme. So they know that there's 5 books, and again, it's organized through. So when they're reading the Psalms in their Bible, they won't be confused. They'll understand why it's this way. But I'm not going to say, okay, Psalm 75, which book is it in? They could test that. But for me, that's not the goal. Like I said, if I want to make an exam difficult, okay, I'll give you the question. But my goal as a servant, I really want them to know and understand the Psalms in these basic things much more. So like I said, the testable, we're pushing the committee, and they're excellent committee. As always, whatever we ask for them, they're usually very quick to do. So that's why I'm trying to push them to be more creative in the testing. Whereas before, I know sometimes they have a tendency, because all the kids are very bright and the servants are so good, so they have to make hard questions to make it challenging. But we want to move, instead of trying to trick you, to try to get the deep knowledge. So if we can move in depth more, I think we'll all be happy by it.
Again, question about the appendix 1. Is there a way to, when are we going to have the test? That's what Abu Michael will announce that. Is there a way to email or connect with the committee? I think there's an email for yes. I'm sure if you go to the ysc-karaza.org, you will find a way how to contact us. Yeah.
If not, please contact them.
I'm trying to make sure that we contact us. Yes, there's an email on the YSC Karaza, and there is also a WhatsApp group to get notification on announcements. I think these are all the questions. No more questions. Okay, good.
Thank you very much, and thank you, David. Thank the committee. Like I said, please, I know we need a little bit more patience. Be patient with us. We're preparing. They're trying to do the best. Yes.
Where is the competition going to be? Abu Michael will announce that. I don't think Abu Michael announced that. He told me, but I'm not sure. Okay.
I have the answer to be determined. So, yeah, we have a most likely.
Okay, here, most likely.
Most likely.
Okay, so,
But they're still working on it to finalize.
okay.
Anything else we can pray for?
من الليل يزك سبتريك أيوك أجيب نفماتك نكايك استوسيون خلو ينتي يعقوب بينوغن انت معتو صالة بكتب صد بنت دافيد تي صوفيا انت سولو بابن مان بركيتم في طبيعي جني ابوستو شوي صفيا ريبون تنفتاه ايرات من بنيوت تايوت عرش رفس فافا وادروس من بنيوت متروفوليتيس من بنيوت ابسكوبوس ابا كيرون نوتين تيد بيف اغرو هيجنو اترونوس نان ميشن رومبي نمهان سيو انهيريني كون انتيت سيفيو انو غاجي تيرو صابا سيت انو اتقالمي شو بين لايسون كيريا فلوغيس مويرويس دي ميتانيا كوني ايبول غاندي اسمو
Berestos benoti. Ebor ante tiherini moinan ante kerini seminan ante kerini kanen of anana voltrith okta. Mon mismon bimashain mean make us, O Lord, worthy to pray with all thanksgiving. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Give us this day our daily bread. Give us our need us. Deliver us from Christ Jesus. Now may the love of God the Father, the grace of only begotten Son of our God and Savior Jesus Christ, the communion and the gift of the Holy Spirit be with us. Wish to go in peace. Peace of our Lord be with us.